Hello, everyone, and welcome to this introductory session where we discuss what we're calling the Thrive 1.0 initiative, a set of resources and community and events and support for Mormons who are transitioning in a faith crisis and or post-Mormons who are looking for healing and growth after leaving Mormonism. What we're going to be doing today is just giving you an overview of our first best attempt at collecting our thoughts around this initiative. And then we're going to be modeling what we hope will be maybe a first session for the local Thrive groups to experience in these local Thrive support groups that will be happening hopefully all around the country and maybe someday the world. So very soon, as in right now, I'll be getting into what all this means. What is Thrive? Some of you will know that in June 2019, we held our first Thrive event. This was a global event with 300 people organized by some dear friends here in Salt Lake City around the idea of promoting healing and growth for people transitioning out of Mormon Orthodoxy and or leaving Mormonism. So the whole tagline for the Thrive event was healing and growth after or beyond Mormonism. This event was a huge success. It was sold out, 4.9 out of 5 reviews by everyone who attended. And it's led to lots of talk about what else can we do as a group to provide support and resources and community for transitioning and post-Mormons. So we have an amazing Thrive event scheduled for November 2019. We'll be talking more about that soon. But what I'll lay out now is some of the bullet points for the Thrive 1.0 initiative. So our mission is to support Mormons through faith transition. We know that there are tens of thousands of Mormons all around the world right now who, believe it or not, have never heard of CES Letter, have never heard of Mormon Stories podcast, have never heard of Sunstone or any of the amazing Waka, any of the amazing resources that are out there. They're just suffering in silence, alone, thinking that they're the only person out there, having no resources and no support. So the Thrive Initiative is targeted first and foremost to these people, to help them know that they're not alone, that they're not crazy, and that there are resources to help them minimize the collateral damage and the pain and maximize the joy and the healing and the growth that can accompany a Mormon faith crisis. So we're going to support that. We're going to promote post-Mormon healing and growth, and we're going to facilitate healthy post-Mormon community. And we're going to be emphasizing the fact that this isn't to replace any of the amazing existing communities all throughout Mormonism, post-Mormonism. This is to support them and help grow local communities. So now that we've talked about our mission, we'll talk about kind of some of the specific offerings. The first thing that we hope to offer are resources. This can include online presentations. A lot of the content that Natasha Helfer Parker and I have been presenting at workshops and retreats around the world that people have had to attend and pay money to access, we want to just offer for free. So we're going to be creating a lot of online presentations, content, curriculum, and modules to support Mormons in faith crisis. And ultimately, we hope this culminates in the creation of a book or a series of books so that people can just have a manual for navigating a Mormon faith crisis or a manual for navigating a marriage during and after a Mormon faith transition. So that's kind of all part of the vision. Lots of content, easily accessible everywhere so that you don't have to attend a workshop or retreat or pay a bunch of money to get the support that you need. So that's the first thing, resources. The second thing we are doing and hope to continue doing are events. We plan to do at least 2 Thrive events a year, one that's global and centralized over like a 3-day period that's intended to be more of a retreat style, more intimate, more interpersonal, where over a period of 3 days, people can really get to know each other, really form friendships, deep, meaningful community and connections, and get immersive content and experiences to help them through their faith crisis. That's what the June 2019 Thrive experience was, and we plan on doing that every summer. That's our current plan. So look for that in June 2020 as well. In addition, we plan to do a semi-annual event, let's just say in the fall or winter of each year, that's more like, we want to say kind of a post-Mormon general conference, for lack of a better term, which is a single day, some of the best presentations out there, thought leaders, subject matter experts, and amazing members of our community just sharing the best talks imaginable to support healing and growth in a faith crisis. And this November, we are so excited to pre-announce that we have lined up Wayne Sermon, who is the lead guitarist of Imagine Dragons, along with Amber Scora, who is the amazing author of the New York Times bestselling book, Leaving the Witness, an ex-Jehovah's Witness who is getting global attention at her amazing book. We've had her on Mormon Stories, and we're going to be bringing her to Salt Lake City to meet the thousands of her adoring fans. So our hope is that this becomes the largest event ever held in the world, in the history of the world, dedicated for post-Mormons, specifically focusing on healing and growth. So we're excited to announce that. And I'll be there, Natasha Helfer Parker and other amazing speakers, Christian Moore, and others will be speaking. So we'll be holding at least 2 events annually if all this works out. And also we hope to hold regional events, workshops and retreats, in Chicago, in Arizona, in Idaho, in Nevada, in Texas, wherever there's a real need to bring people together to forge community and to provide support on a local level for healing and growth, like we've been doing over the past several years. We hope to continue that, and not just with me, not just with Natasha, but with thought leaders and experts, wherever they may be. We want to connect people in need with people who can provide support. So we've got resources, we've got events. The next thing that we have are local support groups, and that's the main reason why we're creating this content today. We want to facilitate the creation of or enhance the experience of existing local support communities to create communities of support for Mormons in faith crisis and beyond. Now, to give a little context, already we have the amazing Mormon Spectrum group that you can go to mormonspectrum.org, click on a map at mormonspectrum.org/map, and you can zoom into this global map with push pins of support communities all around the world, literally hundreds of them at this point, the Utah Valley Post-Mormon community, all the amazing Waka groups, all these Mormon Stories groups, Mormon Spectrum groups, Mormon Faith Transitions groups. There's hundreds of them. And there are these amazing Facebook groups or meetup groups where people are already meeting locally, having book clubs, having dinner groups, having parties, going camping, whatever it is. These groups already exist. We love them. We're not trying to replace them. We are only looking to make them more supportive of people in a faith crisis and make people more aware of these groups that are existing. So we've got these groups that are already created or that need to be created in all these cities where there aren't support groups currently. And what we want to do in supplemental support to Mormon Spectrum, designate all existing and new groups that want to specifically support these monthly Thrive get-togethers. So in other words, in every local support group that desires, they will designate some leaders of these Thrive support groups. They can be psychologists, marriage and family therapists, social workers, or just respected, responsible, mature, healthy members of the local community, people who want to speak up, offer out their names as mentors or group leads for these support groups. And we want to create a centralized directory on a website. Right now, the website is thrivebeyondmormonism.com. That may or may not change. But on this website, we want it to be a centralized directory of these of these support groups that are dedicated to holding these monthly Thrive support events. These Thrive groups will meet monthly. And the purpose will be to sort of sit in a circle of 10 or 15 or 20 or 5 people who are in need of support. And hopefully we'll be able to provide these little 20-minute modules of content that allow, group members to watch a 20-minute session on parenting after Mormonism, or watch a 20-minute session on positive mental health after Mormonism, or dealing with depression or anxiety, or how to communicate with believing family and friends, or how to make your marriage stronger, or Word of Wisdom 2.0, whatever the topic is. They'll be able to watch freely accessible content as a group in these little 20-minute modules, and then discussion questions will be made available so that these support groups can discuss the content that's provided, process it, and share and build community in a way that ultimately provides support for people in faith crisis that doesn't require a formal workshop or retreat with people flying in and people paying a lot of money. We want to do all we can to support people locally meeting each other's needs. So that's what these local support groups are about. And that's what we're hoping to do here. Now, this may or may not work. This may or may not be successful, but we want to offer this as an attempt to see if we can create a model that will facilitate more healing and growth than that we've had prior to 2019, and that we can sort of engineer and innovate in a way that can make it so there's more community and healing and support taking place than currently does. We have some norms for these support groups that I'll just briefly go over. This needs to be people who are 18 or above. We can't have children or youth at these events right now because we don't want there to ever be any risk of abuse, and we don't right now have any infrastructure or facilities to ensure that there are background checks and all the things that we would want to make sure and have before any youth or children were ever put at risk. So these are adults-only events. Some of the norms are we ask that everyone speak and act kindly and respectfully. There feasibly will be mixed faith couples who might attend these events, people who are still believing in some way or other, all the way to people who don't believe anything or who are not affiliated with church at all. And so we need there to be some sort of group norm where everybody speaks and acts kindly and respectfully, given that there will be a spectrum of beliefs and church participation at these events. No illegal activities of any sort should ever be conducted at these events, and any illegal activities should be immediately and promptly reported to law officials. We can't have any illegal activities going on at these events. No abuse of any kind, no sexual abuse, no emotional abuse, no physical abuse, of course. We really want to encourage, if possible, the minimizing or avoidance of the discussion of things like politics or business opportunities or sales, because those topics can distract from the core purposes of these events and really be off-putting for people who are just coming to get support of their faith crisis. So we would love to discourage, again, discussion of politics and business opportunities and sales types of things. We want to discourage the evangelizing of beliefs. If you're still a Christian, these groups aren't the place to try and get people to come to your local Christian group or to try and persuade people to believe in God or not believe in God. If you're a healthy, secular atheist, you shouldn't be evangelizing atheism to the participants either. We shouldn't be trying to persuade people to stay in the church or to leave the church. Evangelizing of any sort is just inappropriate for these sorts of events. Everyone should feel safe to believe exactly what they want to believe or not, to attend or not attend, to participate or not in whatever they want to believe or attend or not attend. And then finally, these groups are not, in some way affiliates directly with any centralized organization. These are locally owned and run groups. We don't control them, and we don't want to be responsible for what happens in the local groups. Now, how that works out legally in the long run, we don't know, but that's our position right now. We're not in any way trying to give the impression that we have quality control or any sort of control over these events. We're just trying to help facilitate healing and growth at a local level. But each group is locally owned and managed. And of course, if there's something inappropriate that goes on, we want to know about it, and we'll promptly delist group leaders or even local communities that violate these group norms. And we'd love to seek your feedback and suggestions on these norms and this vision and this whole project over time. The role of the group leaders are to, number one, find a place to meet, whether it's in someone's home, some local meeting house or room, library, whatever it is, university setting. Group leaders find a place to meet. They pick a time and a date and again, a location for these events. And then they can act as sort of a focal point for the community. And we hope that they will lead and moderate these discussions in a way that respect the group norms that we've outlined. Again, some final disclaimers. This is a social experiment. These groups are autonomous. They're run by volunteers. The leads are not necessarily professionals, although I think it's a great marriage where we can find psychologists, psychiatrists, marriage and family therapists, and social workers to act as leads to these groups. It'll bring them business, which we want to support experts who are supporting people in faith crisis, but also the ethical training and the professional expertise that these leaders, that these professionals have, can be very useful in moderating these sorts of local groups. Having said that, there's not always going to be professionals available or interested in doing this, and we don't want to exclude good people from being able to help support these groups who just want to provide support but don't have that background. But I do think it's interesting. And the final disclaimer is, do seek professional support if you need it. Don't look to these support groups as therapy groups. They're not therapy groups. And don't think of these groups as being a replacement for licensed therapists and or professional coaches who are available. You can always go to the Mormon Mental Health Association, which is a website, and find this directory of providers on local level that have been vetted by the organization who can provide professional support when you need it. So that is the summary of what the Thrive 1.0 initiative is. It may fail tomorrow. It may lead to amazing, incredible things in 1, 5, and 10 years. Who knows? But we're throwing it out there and we're seeing if there's interest, and we'd love your help and support. If you want to provide support or feedback, right now you can email us at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com. Over time, Thrive will probably have its own email address, but for now we don't have one. So that's the best we have. Again, the website that we hope to post all this to right now is thrivebeyondmormonism.com. As we make changes, we'll let you know. Okay, so now that we've given you that introduction, what we'd like to do is provide you with the first content module that you can watch as a group and use in whatever way it is helpful for your first local Thrive support group meeting. And in this first Thrive local support group meeting, we envision you doing storytelling. Storytelling is a long tradition of the Mormon Stories workshops and retreats that we've been doing for years and years and years now, where at the beginning of each workshop or retreat, we would just simply have each person take 3 to 5 minutes to tell their faith crisis story or their journey in an abbreviated way. There are lots of good reasons why we have created and nurtured this tradition of storytelling. Some of the reasons include the following. Storytelling is cathartic. It helps you get out a lot of pent-up feeling and frustration and emotion. Storytelling is healing. As you hear yourself tell your stories, you construct your stories, you tell your story, and as you hear other people tell their stories, a lot of healing and processing can take place. It's also instructive. You can learn a lot from your own story and from other people's stories. So we believe in storytelling, and so that's why we do storytelling. Also, storytelling, we've heard this over and over and over again, storytelling helps people feel like they are not crazy and not alone. So when you hear other people tell their stories, you connect immediately and say, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy. I'm not bad. I'm not sick. I'm less lonely. And I can connect with other humans who are experiencing the same thing that I am. Also, storytelling helps people process their experiences. It's very therapeutic to tell stories. In fact, a viable form of therapeutic support is called journaling or bibliotherapy, where therapists just have clients write out their stories. And that can, in and of itself, can be a very therapeutic intervention. So stories are therapeutic in helping people process their experiences. And finally, storytelling helps build community. From these workshops and retreats that we've been doing for years, amazing friendships and communities have emerged that have become lifelong friendships and communities. And so as you are building these or strengthening these new or already existing communities, the storytelling experience, the storytelling event will help you forge friendships and communities, again, that can last for a very long time. So that's why we do storytelling. We have several ground rules for storytelling that include the following. Number one, first and foremost, is strict confidentiality. These storytelling events are never to be recorded, audio or video, or either, both, whatever. And never are you to reveal who's at these events. Just the attendance at these events should be held in confidence. There are many, many people who are going through a faith crisis who, because of job or familiar reasons, it can't be known that they're even attending these events, let alone what they share at these events. So please never reveal any information at these events that would ever identify anyone, either who they are, that they were at an event like this, or any details of what they share. And of course, it's impossible to regulate that, but we need everyone to commit to maintaining strict confidentiality. And anyone who violates these rules of confidentiality potentially should be subjected to being removed from these events and groups, because that's just the way these groups need to work. Of course, that will be locally enforced. Please use respectful language at these in your storytelling. That's super important. Again, believer, non-believer, church attendee, non-attendee, we should speak with respect about all shades of belief and all shades of church participation or non-participation. Now, that's very difficult because at the same time, we have a rule, which is that you need to be vulnerable and candid. We say in our workshops and retreats that vulnerability is the gasoline to the engine of intimacy, emotional intimacy, and ultimately community. So we want you to balance being respectful, but also being vulnerable and candid in your real experiences. And it's tough to make that balance, but we're asking everyone to make that balance. One really good tip is avoid offensive language like cult or pedophile or whatever really strong language that might unnecessarily alienate people in the room. If you can find or choose words that still get your very candid and vulnerable feelings across, but that don't unnecessarily alienate or offend people who might be in the room, that's nice. Now, having said all that, we also have a ground rule, which is be resilient, which means that you, as much as we're all going to try to lay out these ground rules and be respectful, people are still going to say things that are probably hurtful or offensive, depending on where you are in your journey and in your sensitivity to these sorts of things. So if you hear something that's hurtful or offensive, we ask you to be resilient, which means don't leave, don't get up, don't be offended. Just try and put on the cloak of empathy and realize that people are in real pain, struggling with real issues. And sometimes they're going to say things that might be hurtful to you, but you are an adult, you are strong, you are resilient, you are capable, and you can endure a few people expressing things in a suboptimal way, because that's what it means to be an adult in the 21st century. So try to be resilient. Please respect the time limits. So if the group decides on a 3-minute or a 5-minute or a 10-minute limit to your storytelling, please don't be that guy or gal that does 10 or 15 minutes, makes everyone look at their clock and roll their eyes and have to leave the group early because you couldn't abide by the time limits. And it's very helpful when group leaders actually have a little watch or a little timer on their phone that dings after, the 3 or the 5 minutes so that everyone knows when they are to wrap up. So we'll do that. We'll model that today. If I can have somebody who has a little timer that can time for 5 minutes. So please respect the time limits. Pay attention to opportunities for connection, for similarities, for opportunities for connection within the group. Again, maybe 2 sets of parents have LGBT kids. Maybe two couples are in a mixed faith marriage. Maybe different couples are grandparents or young parents or whatever it is. Look for similarities that you can build friendships and community upon. That's a really important part of this storytelling. And then something that we love to do as sort of a tradition within our retreats and workshops is feel free to clap at the end of everyone's story. We think every story deserves celebration. So if you want to clap at the end of each person's story, we think that's a great way to celebrate and reward and positively reinforce their vulnerability and their sharing. So those are the ground rules for storytelling. And before we jump into it, we provided a sample of some of the questions or topics that can be addressed during your 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is. It's usually pretty good to share your name if you feel comfortable. It's pretty valuable to share where you live specifically, so people who live close to you can know that someone close to them is around. If you want to, you can share what led to your faith crisis. I want to just say this can be a real rat hole because people can, as you know from Mormon stories, people can spend 10 hours talking about what led to their faith crisis, and we don't have 10 hours. So many of these stories are going to be very similar. I listen to Mormon Stories podcast, or I listen to Mormon Expression podcast, or Year of Polygamy podcast, or I found, Mormon Think, or read Rough Stone Rolling, or read the CES letter. So it's not really necessary to sort of cover the same kind of grounds that most people will likely cover during their faith crisis. But if there's something unique or interesting about what led to your faith crisis, of course, feel free to touch on that briefly. A couple other things that you could talk about in your storytelling are what has been the hardest part about your faith transition. That's really useful because it lets people know your particular pain points or what you've struggled most with or what's been hardest. And a final thing you can talk about is what you're hoping to get out of the support group, why you're attending, what your needs are. And again, that can help alert group members to knowing what your needs are so that the group can figure out a way to provide you with support. Maybe it's casseroles. Maybe it's just attending a wedding, sitting outside the temple grounds of a wedding that you're sitting outside of. Maybe it's providing support for your LGBTQ family members. Maybe you're in the midst of a divorce, or maybe someone's sick, or whatever it is. We hope that groups can rise up to support those in need. And just because we leave Orthodox Mormonism and church attendance doesn't mean we can't love and support each other in a community. So those are samples of the storytelling questions. And without any further ado, we are now going to conduct our own sample storytelling round. And we are, interestingly and funnily, going to do it with the original founding team of the Thrive Conference. So we have several really cool, amazing people here. All of these people worked very hard to support the June 2019 Thrive event. And you're going to meet the founding Thrive members now. And we'll go ahead, and the time is now yours, brothers and sisters, to tell your Mormon transition stories. How does that sound?
So I'm Lisa. This is Paul Hacking. We are living in Lake Point right now. We love it there. Both Paul and I grew up in really, really LDS homes. We would call them Bruce R. McConkie dads. Both of our dads had pretty high callings in the church, and it was a small town in Utah.
And being in a small town is a big deal because your whole life and your work and everything is centered around the church. And so we grew up that way. We both were ideal members of the church as youth, and we loved being members of the church. But my first hiccup came with the church when I was preparing to go on my mission. And Lisa and I were high school sweethearts, and we had to drive 3 hours to the temple. And Lisa came, even though there's two years between us, and she waited in the car while I went in to get my endowments. And I'm in having my endowments, and all of a sudden, I just felt so sick because I'm watching my grandfather, who I loved, and my father and my brother pantomiming different ways of taking their life. This is something I was not prepared for, and it left me with this deep, sick feeling that lasted throughout the rest of the day until I went out to the car where Lisa was.
And I said, so how was it? I was so excited. He got to go in this cool place, and I hadn't yet. And he said, that's not the church I grew up in. And it was scary from there.
But I had my mission call to the most beautiful place in the world, to southern Germany, and so I went along the way. That's the next step in the Mormon life. So I went to southern Germany. I love my mission. I love my companions. I loved the mission presidents, the culture, the country, but I absolutely hated tracting and getting that rejection that happened in Germany every day, and it created lots of anxiety. And I prayed for help that never came, and it was really difficult because I was told if I did certain things, lived a certain way, I would receive help, and I never did. And that was really hard, but yet at the same time, I had the goal at the end of the mission, which was Lisa. So I made it through the mission somehow and came home, and I was so lucky that we got married 6 weeks later.
Yeah. And we're still here.
And we're still
30
here.
plus years, and we're still here. So it was a great 30 years for us, I thought. There were often times when I would go to state conference alone on our honeymoon. We'd set all these goals, but then I realized I had set the goals. Paul really hadn't set the goals.
I was going to agree to anything she wanted that night.
I always had big callings. Paul kind of dodged the callings, hanging out in executive secretary or some calling like that, and I had the big callings. And then we went, had all our kids raised, and I thought that probably Paul would go inactive once all our kids were raised. But our youngest was a senior in high school. We had a kid on a mission, and it was during that summer I was Young Women's president, and he started to really not be happy.
Well, I fully intended to keep all those goals that we set on the honeymoon, but it was about a month later that one of the goals was to go to the temple once a month. And so we went to the temple, and all those emotions came back to me. And it was really difficult to have full intent of doing something and then have emotions keep you away from that. And so it became a process for 30 years of dodging every calling that may put me in a position where I had to testify at the temple or had to line up and force other people to go to the temple. I just made myself small. And when you make yourself small, it really creates a lot of anxiety, and you force it and you're packing it all in. And that's how we lived for 30 years. The only fights we had were about the church.
So I was Young Women's president, and they asked all of the organizations to go do sealings, which was really a hard thing because we were already doing all day Sunday, a weekday activity, and now we had a sealing assignment that was just nuts. And Paul was balking at having to go do that sealing assignment, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, I have to go. If you don't go with me, someone else I'll have to ask another man, and no, you have to go with me. And then I looked at him, the guy's coming to talk to us, and I looked at him and I saw like physical pain on his face. Like this really hurt him bad. And my heart softened. I said, okay, just go this once with me. You will never have to go again. And then after that, it was a Labor Day weekend. And I said, okay, show me something that you want me to see so that I can understand you.
I always, during that 30 years, whenever I'd hear anything critical about the church, I would feel also a sick feeling, which I attributed to Satan. Now I know it's called cognitive dissonance, when you can't hold two opposing thoughts at the same time. But I finally allowed myself, after 30 years of looking at some of the critical aspects of the church, and my testimony fell really fast. But then I thought, what's this going to do to my marriage? And I was sick to death. And I have so much empathy for mixed faith marriages, because I felt like I was going to be in that situation. And I kept approaching Lisa, and we ended up in fights almost every time because she didn't want to listen to me. But she finally saw my pain, and she asked.
He said, okay, I'll listen to something. And he really just wanted me to understand where he was at. Never thought that I would join him on this journey, just understand. And so I listened to the Mormon Stories 400, which is John's survey that he had done and why people leave the church, because I really thought people left the church because they're lazy or they just couldn't handle being bored, or not any of those reasons. And that was a real aha moment for me. So I said, okay, show me something else. And all Labor Day weekend, we watched things, and it makes it sound like it came really fast, but really it wasn't, because all along I had been listening to him say things about the church, but it was like finally my aha moment of, holy cow, he made it all up.
So it brought our marriage so close together, but at the same time, we had a son on a mission, and we knew that he was loving his mission. So we wanted to stay as active as we could until he came home in 9 months. But at Christmas time, my daughter realized something was up, and I made the huge mistake of dumping all these issues on her, thinking that she would want to know and that she would be enlightened and say, oh, thank you, Dad. But the opposite happened, actually. It was a stupid move and I've learned a lot, but it's created huge rifts with our daughter that we still are repairing to this day. At the same time, we had a son, a high school son, that was seminary president, senior class president, and he was hearing little snippets, and we could tell that he was not happy. He was getting on ready for his mission, and so we had a son coming home, and we made it to that day.
So he finally, after lots of hard things, he came out to us, and he wouldn't have done that if we hadn't have had
Which
this
son?
change of faith. So the youngest son came out, who is gay, and we're so happy we were where we were at. We feel like the universe conspired to help us be where we were at so that we could just love him and put our arms around him. So we had the son coming home, the daughter who hated us, and
our son that came home from his mission, we didn't dump anything on him. We were just told him we love him, that our views on the church have changed, that we'll always be his parents, and that nothing will change. And our relationship with him has been the opposite to this day. We learned a lot about that. A year later, he got married in the temple with us outside. We had a great day, especially because we had lots of friends that came and supported us outside the temple, but also because our son understood where we were at, and he knew we loved him, and he stood up for us. But I would say that's probably the hardest part of our faith transition, is still dealing with family members and trying to be authentic, because Lisa's superpower is authenticity, but at the same time, we want to respect their boundaries. So we continue to try to build loving boundaries of trust with them.
but that truly is the hardest part of our journey, is we still have 2 believing kiddos.
And the best part is all the great friends we've met that we can be authentic with, and it's really changed our life. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Including all of you.
I'm Lindy Johnson, and
Mike Johnson.
we live in Spanish Fork, Utah. And a couple of years ago, we were having some struggles in our marriage because I was very diligent about wanting to go to church and do callings and glorify, the work. And Mike was not quite as into it as I was. And so, I don't know, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was very, very believing, but working a lot of hours. Didn't have an amazing testimony. I had a great testimony, but when I say didn't have an amazing testimony, I wasn't the guy that was constantly in the scriptures studying. I didn't go on a mission. Once I got to the point where I was worthy to go, we decided to get married instead. Almost went several times, but wasn't willing to go on a mission and lie. I wasn't willing to lie to go on the mission like a lot of other people I knew had done. So yeah, always wanted, and I like truth, I like integrity. And but so I was like 28, so this is like 4 years ago. Was ready to just take a break from church. So I'd sleep in on purpose, keep closing my eyes. And that was really contentious because she's getting kids ready, I'm sleeping in, I just don't want to go, I'm working a lot, I just didn't want to go. I never had any doubts about the church. It was never any reason why I didn't want to go, but yeah, it was creating a rift for sure in the marriage.
And my parents had been divorced when I was little, and then my mom again when I was in high school. And so for me at that point, I was like, I'm not gonna let this be the thing that blows up my marriage. So I consciously made a decision that we as a family were going to take a break from church to kind of work on family time and, just take a break. And it's funny looking back because we, had the elders quorum president come over and the bishop, and they were like, really, if there's anything you want to talk about, like, let us know. Like, we're, really willing to talk about any issues you might have. And we were just like, no, it's just really, we just need to take a break for our family. And so we basically went inactive, and it had been about 6 months. And I remember scrolling through Facebook, and I saw this ad pop up for some news article, I think in the Salt Lake Tribune, that what the headline was like multiple accounts of the first vision or something. And so I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So I clicked on it and started reading this article, and it linked me over to LDS.org, where it was the Gospel Topics essay that talked about the multiple accounts of the first vision. And I was like this, I was 26, 27 years old. It was like the first time I had ever heard of any other version of the first version than the 1938 standard publicized version. And so I tried to talk to him about it. And even though he was very much not wanting to go to church, he very much was not wanting to hear about it.
Yeah.
Hear about it.
So me not wanting to go to church, we still went to church for basically 2 years till I turned 30.
Yeah,
we went
that's true.
Off and on. I got a calling in the deacons quorum, which was awesome. I actually really liked it. But teaching the kids and having to testify was tough for me because I felt like I was lying. I just kept getting to this point where I felt like a hypocrite, which that's not me. I don't want to be a hypocrite. So we went on my birthday cruise when I turned 30. I'd never drank alcohol. I'd never done any drugs. And she had done a few of those things growing up, but I never had.
I'm from Seattle, so I wasn't raised in Utah.
But I drank for the first time on my birthday cruise. And so we drank. And from then on, I pretty much stopped going to church. And I would drink every now and again. And so this is like a year after that, that she brings this up to me, and I'm like, whoa, like, I'm not going to church, but don't talk to me about, I don't want to hear any of this anti-Mormon stuff. Like, and she got mad. You've met her. She's kind of persistent.
Well, and it was on LDS.org. So it's like, why are you not wanting to listen to what is on LDS.org? It's the church's website. This is really frustrating.
We're not having this conversation. Not happening. And she tried again. I was like, babe, stop. I'm not talking about this. And so she spent the next month devouring John Dehlin, just
Mormon
like
Stories
earpods
podcast.
in, reading stuff. I'd get home from work, and it was just constant. She would put earphones in because she knew I didn't want to hear that. She was trying to be respectful of me not hearing.
But I was obsessed. I was like, what else
obsessed.
don't I know? Like,
Yeah.
And I kind of got to this point where it was like I was standing on the edge of a precipice trying to decide whether I do or I don't believe. And, he was on the believing side. So what do? You can't jump without him.
Yeah. So then I overheard some of the podcasts, and I heard the way that John was mediating, and it felt very neutral. It felt very safe. You could tell he was definitely not anti-Mormon. And so I felt safe enough to listen to what was happening. And the interview was interesting. So it didn't take me very long. Once I was open to listening to the issues and to learning about things, if something's true, it doesn't matter what you throw against it, it should stand up, and nothing was. So it was pretty easy for me. One of the things that I want is integrity, and it wasn't there, so I was done. I was out. So it took me like 3 weeks.
Yeah, it took me like a year and a half maybe to process. And then once, I came downstairs one time to say goodnight, and he had the CES letter pulled up on his desktop, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's finally happening.
Yeah.
He's finally arrived.
Yeah.
And then that was probably October of last year.
Yeah,
Maybe, so like 9 months
we told
ago.
our families.
And so then I
February of
did,
this
I
year.
went to a faith crisis workshop in
She hosted
Orem.
one.
Well, I didn't host it.
Well, she
but
didn't host it. She planned it.
I just helped a little. And anyway, so, and it was amazing. And yeah, like it was the
even
first
at that
time
I was still pretty out. But even
Yeah.
at that time, you're planning this, and I'm like,
he's like, why
you're
are you?
planning this anti-Mormon like hate rally thing? What is happening?
I was like, you don't want to go? And he's like, no, I don't
I'm
want to
like,
go to
no.
an
She was
anti-Mormon
actually
thing. I
really
was
offended
really
with
offended.
that.
I was really mad.
That I didn't want to go to the thing she'd spent so much time planning.
But I mean, I went, and you came for a
I
couple
came for the
hours.
last hour. It was really good.
And then the next day
good.
we wrote emails to our family. And that was probably the hardest part, has been trying to navigate our relationships with our believing family and now our neighbors and our friends. And so it's like straddling this line of wanting to be authentic and living my truth and being who I am, but also trying to be overly respectful and conscientious of what everybody else is believing and thinking.
Yeah.
It's really tough. But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
That would be a nutshell.
I'm Jenny Martin, and this is Clint Martin. We live in Springville, Utah. Let's see. Our faith crisis started about a year and a half ago, and it's my fault.
Jenny, you led us astray.
I think it first started for me going to Sunday school. They started talking about the multiple accounts of the first vision, and I'd never heard that before. And I'm like, how could I be in this church that long? And I went to seminary, graduated from seminary, went to institute. I've never heard anything about any of this. And then they talked about the book of Abraham in Sunday school, and I just didn't even know what to do to think about that. And slept after that. I went to visit my sister in California, and I was telling her, I'm having some doubts about the church. I don't really know. And she said, well, you really should read the CS letter. And so I said, I'm like, I think that's anti-Mormon, but the church is not telling me some things. And just, I saw a lot of red flags, and so I really wanted to know. So I said, if it's true, it should be able to stand up to some scrutiny. If they're not telling me things, I've got to figure this out for myself. So one afternoon, I went and popped it open and looked at it, and mind blown. Yeah. And so I had to wait till Clint got home that evening, and so I showed him. I said, what do you think of this? And he looked at it really quick, and he's like, you know what? The church isn't true. Like, that fast. Like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, that was easy for him. But I had to be sure, because I'm that type, I have to, especially, the church was my whole world. So I just ordered all these books on Amazon, ordered tons of books, and just started reading stacks of books, and had to be really sure. I read No Man Knows My History, and then I told Clint I can't go back to church ever again. So, yeah, and that was scary. That was a scary day for me. Yeah.
So then we have 4 kids, and just like she said, she showed me the CES letter, so I read it. It wasn't 1 second; it took like 20 minutes. I read it,
I felt like 1 second. I'm like,
and then
so sure, so fast.
and I said, yeah, this is probably accurate, is what I said. Like, yeah, this makes sense. I can see, I'm pretty good at evaluating stuff pretty fast, and I'm like, yeah, this is probably accurate. The church is not true the way that we've been told our whole lives. Because we both grew up in the church. So, but we didn't know what to tell our kids. And, our one son, Ethan, really loved to go to church. And so anyway, we're just we didn't know what to do. So Jenny wouldn't go to church anymore. So she'd sit at home and listen to Mormon stories. And I would take the kids to church. Our oldest had already moved out. So he didn't like it, didn't go. And the youngest didn't like to go at that point, but I'd take the 2 middle kids to church with me. And then our daughter ended up leaving to go to China, and she was concerned. Let's see, I skipped one part. So one day we were watching a show about Waco and the Branch Davidians, and my daughter said, "That's kind of like our church." And so we hadn't brought anything, we hadn't told the kids any of this at this point. So that was kind of the moment where we just started talking and telling them, hey, we've kind of been studying things about the church and we've been finding out this stuff. We didn't just lay it on them hard, but just kind of voicing some of our concerns. And so that was right before she was going to leave to China. She was worried. And so when she left, she said, well, I don't want Ethan to have to go to church by himself. And I said, well, no, I'll still keep going with him. So I was still going to church with him. She leaves probably within a few weeks and maybe a month after she had gone. He said, Dad, I need to talk to you. He took me downstairs. I could tell it was something serious. And he said, hey, I think that I'm gay. And I said, it's no problem. We can figure it out. It's no problem. I love you the same. Everything's fine. And he said, I don't think there's a place for me in the Mormon church because they don't like gay people. And I said, don't worry, we can figure out something else. We'll find another church. I'll help you. It'll be fine. So, I really feel like it was kind of the right move for our family at the right time, kind of like you guys, we just felt like we were guided, so that we could be supportive for him. And but our daughter was still in China, and I didn't want to tell her over the phone, so we just didn't tell her until she got home. And so a couple days after she got back, I took her to lunch and told her, and it's hard. I think that she felt like the family just kind of left her in the dust. 1 second we're going in this religion that we've taught them and raised them in their whole life, and then the next second everyone else has left and she's just kind of the sole survivor sitting there. And I think it's tough. She's tough, she's resilient, she's smart. We still have a great relationship, but it's hard. They're just like you guys have experienced. There are realities there that we're still trying to cope with this very second. Anything else you think of?
I think it's hard for me is just lack of community. So I'm just so excited about these support groups because it's so healing just to meet post-Mormons with so many family and friends, and they're great, and being respectful, loving to them all the time is so great, and I love it. But sometimes you feel real alone. So it's nice to have post-Mormon friends, and I'm really thankful for that. So
that's it.
Hi, my name is Brooke Miller. This is my husband, Josh Miller. And we both come from South Jordan. And initially, I come from a very rich pioneer heritage, and I'm a direct descendant from Lorenzo Snow. Growing up, I was raised in a family of 8. I had 6 brothers and 1 older sister, of which my 6 brothers all served missions. And a lot of my extended family that I'm related to have very high callings. I had a very good childhood. Like I said before, I was raised in a very strict upbringing. And I really enjoyed living and being raised in the Mormon life. I had lots of friends who were all Mormon. I didn't really associate with friends outside of the church. I would say I kind of was always taught that your friends that you choose will guide you to good places and help you make good decisions, and that you should, which, in general is true. But I think that upon leaving the church, we found otherwise that there are some great people inside and outside of the church. And being raised, I was always really good. I never really drank. We didn't drink Diet Coke in the home. We always went to church every Sunday, all 3 meetings. So yeah, that's basically, in a nutshell, that's me, if you want to go.
Yeah, so my story is a bit different. I grew up in the South, so a really small town in Arkansas, just on the border of Texas, Texarkana. And so I was the only Mormon kid that grew up, but my family, my mom was raised LDS in Bountiful, Utah. My dad was from Oklahoma. He was loosely raised Baptist. But when I was really young, 5, 6, 7, we weren't really active. We didn't go to church. We moved around a lot. And when I was about 8 or 9, my dad actually suggested that we start going to church again. And so we eventually started getting baptized. My mom and dad separated when I was young. And we were raised by my mom. But from that point on, we were very religious. I've got 3 siblings, an older sister, brother, and then a younger sister. And so we were, from then on, we were 30 minutes from the church building. We went to church every Sunday. We were there every Wednesday for scouts and youth activities. So yeah, I served a full-time mission in the Philippines. My brother went on a mission. Both my sisters went to BYU and graduated from Y. And then as we got older and all the kids graduated from high school, we kind of migrated out to Utah because that's where all the Mormons were. But so I grew up very different. None of my friends were LDS. So I got a different perspective. I got to see how people lived outside of the church and how there were good people in every religion and outside of religion. So that's my upbringing.
Mm-hmm. And then we met actually when we were about 13. His sister and my brother got married. So, and we actually maintained a really good friendship, and we would hang out with each other's friends all up until he went on his mission. And then after his mission, I just thought he was so cute, and we got married, and apparently I think he liked me too. But
apparently.
Yeah. But yeah. And then once we got married, I think that's when things, it was probably a year after, that's when we had our first child, and that's when things started to change. I think that it was like we were very staunch still, and we still went to church every Sunday, but I felt like slowly, as the longer we were married, I was starting to pull the wagon a little bit. But we had our first 2 kids. We had questions that we just would put on our shelf here and there. And then we got pregnant with our 3rd child, and which we had a very vicious pregnancy battle that we lost to a stillborn. And then after that pregnancy, shortly after the LGBTQ policy came out, and that's, I think, when things got a little more serious for Josh. He started to question things a little more, even though I didn't necessarily agree with the policy as well. That's when we started questioning things. So
yeah, I just felt like, even since I was young, I felt like I always had an issue with that. Even being grown in the South, where people have very strong opinions about the LGBT community, I thought, how could a loving God make somebody gay or lesbian and then tell them that they can't live their life that way? It just didn't seem to make sense to me. And so, especially when they came out with the policy, it really started to get my wheels turning and think about other things. And then at that same period, it seemed like more and more information was coming out about the church. There was the seer stone that was found, and I just kind of put, like most people put, the anti-Mormon stuff, because I heard it my whole childhood growing up in the South. I just tucked it in a corner thinking it was anti-Mormon, made up lies, blah blah blah. But it wasn't until those things started to come out that I really kind of allowed myself to start to question and see if there was any validity to some of these things that were being stated about the church. So yeah, that's where I started my research. I remember one time I was in church and somebody mentioned that Oliver Cowdery left, and it just blew my mind. I know a lot of people know that. I had no idea. And so the whole Elders Quorum lesson, I just remember Googling everything about Oliver Cowdery, the witnesses, and that led me down the rat hole. And then from then on, I started studying everything else there was to study.
Yeah, and then shortly after our fourth child was born, actually it was 2 weeks before our fourth child was born, he had come out on the patio, because I was out on the patio, and he came and sat down by me, and he said, "Have you read the CES letter?" And like immediately that wall of cognitive dissonance went up, and then the first thing that came to my mind was, I'm going to be one of those wives that take my children to church alone for the rest of my life. But shortly after I had battled a mixed faith marriage, me and Josh had battled this mixed faith marriage for about 7 to 9 months. Long story short, I had finally sat down and decided that I wanted to better understand him. I had a friend that had left like 10 years prior, so I invited her over one night, and Josh happened to walk in on our conversation, and I was just listening to them exchange information back and forth, and that was the moment that everything had dawned on me that nothing was holding any weight. It couldn't hold any water, and the church wasn't what it was claiming to be. And it was like this epiphany moment that I had, and it was, I just remember the next morning waking up, wanting to pinch myself, wanting to believe so hard that didn't happen the night before, and that I think the thing that was hardest for me, knowing that I had to tell my family, because knowing that I was going to hurt them, knowing that how much the church meant to them, and that I would have to tell them that we were leaving, because the things that I was hearing from the night before, if that was true, I couldn't sit and watch or be in a religion like that. So sure enough, I did lots of research. The more research I did, the more me and Josh's relationship started to better. And we had a daughter who was getting baptized, and it was very important to us that we made the right decision. And we had the golden opportunity to meet and sit down with Spencer Fluman. And we talked with him and had maybe a 3 or 4 hour conversation. And we actually eventually were able to sit down and have a podcast with John going over our conversation with Spencer. So I think one of the last things that when we stopped going to church, what the final call was, we brought our kids into primary, and I just was watching them teach our kids things I didn't really agree with. And we haven't been back to church since then. But let's see, what else?
You know, I mean, looking back, it was a long process, but we're way better off for it now than we ever were in our marriage. 10 plus years married, more open, more communicative, more real about how we feel about everything. And, you know, I think the hardest part really was just the backlash from family, right? And I think that's still something that continues on.
I think if there was like one purpose in a support group for us, I think that it probably would be to be understood and try to get to a place where we can come on a common ground with family and feel loved and feel understood and understand each other.
Yeah, when you leave the church, you lose your entire community, your foundation, the way you think about choices and right or wrong. You have to rebuild all of those components. So I think what we're really looking for out of this group is just support, understanding, work together to really understand how we feel moving forward, how we raise our kids,
and to tackle difficult issues, basically.
Yeah, totally.
So, yeah, that's it.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for everyone sharing your stories. Those stories were powerful. They were touching, they were moving, and they were important. And as far as I'm concerned, they're great examples and models for how members of these local Thrive support communities can share their stories. Of course, every story is going to be different, so I hope everyone feels free to tell the story however feels natural to them. But I'm really grateful that all of you guys were willing to share your stories. And I think of you all as dear friends, and I love you guys. So thank you. And so we're signing off for now. Good luck with your first local Thrive support group event. And what you can look forward to in the months ahead is more little content modules providing support for you individually and as a group with accompanying discussion questions to help facilitate group processing and group conversations. And we for sure are going to have Thrive 2019 November, an amazing event in Salt Lake City with Wayne Sermon of Imagine Dragons and Amber Scora leaving the witness, and me and Natasha and other really cool people, Christian Moore. So stay tuned for who the full speaker lineup will be. We'll be having hopefully more workshops and retreats locally as we develop those. Of course, the June 2020 Thrive event that will be a full weekend, deep and immersive retreat experience. And many more cool and interesting things ahead. Check out thrivebeyondmormonism.com is the website. Email us at mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com for now. And please give us your feedback and thoughts if you have ideas, if you want to volunteer, if you think we should make some changes, if you want to lead your own local Thrive support group. Any of those things and more, we hope you'll reach out to us. And we'll grow this thing to as big and as beautiful as we all feel inclined to support and participate. So thanks again, everyone here. Thanks to those of you who have volunteered to lead these local support groups. Thanks to everyone who's willing to participate. And please share this. Please spread the word. And, we don't want to spend a bunch of money on budget. We don't have a bunch of money to spend on marketing and advertising. So we hope this can really be spread through the Facebook support groups, through local groups, through word of mouth, through social media. So please spread the word about this initiative. And we look forward in the months and years ahead to doing a lot of healing and growth in post-Mormonism. So thanks to all of you. Thanks to you guys. And we'll see you soon on another episode of Thrive. Yeah.